Hello, this is SR. Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. The puppy was ungainly, maybe 8 weeks old. The color is brindle, mostly boxer, but it is clear that there are other breeds in the mix. He noticed a woman looking at him through the bars and turned on the puppy charm, wagging his tail and moving to the front of the cage. The woman put her hand into the cage, and the dog licked it, hoping that this was the ticket to finding a permanent home. The woman's look told the puppy that he was on the right track. The woman's eyes widened, tears welled up in the inner corners of her eyes. She turned to the man kneeling behind her. "Yes, this guy," she said. "And you're going to feed him, walk him, and take care of him?" he said, his voice so full of disbelief that the puppy could almost understand him. "Well, yes, he will be my little buddy, he will follow me everywhere, protect me and all that," she said. He rolled his eyes, not trying to hide his pessimism. She had made similar promises before, and almost every time the responsibility for everything she wanted eventually fell on him. Gardening, cooking, communicating with a sixth grader from Nigeria, and much more. He really didn't want to take care of the dog either, but what could he say? You do everything for those you love. "Okay, we're taking this big-eyed guy who's looking at her from the cage," Bryce England told the man from the animal shelter. "Wrap it up and put on a bow. You won't be able to pick him up today. He needs to be sterilized first," the shelter worker said. "And we can do it tomorrow, and if everything goes well, then you can pick him up the day after tomorrow." "Hank," Vera England said to the man who gave her a puzzled look. "We'll take Hank home the day after tomorrow." "That's right," he smiled, surreptitiously trying to look into her blouse, getting up from his knees behind her husband. Bryce caught this attempt to look into the blouse and grinned to himself. It was hardly the first time some crook had tried to look into his wife's blouse. She probably didn't even notice anymore, because it was corny, something like an occupational hazard. The animal grew out of a puppy and turned into a fairly large dog. Vera took care of him for the first 3 weeks, and then she gradually shifted her responsibilities to Bryce. As he took care of the dog, the animal gradually switched its allegiance to Bryce. He still liked Vera, but dogs are even simpler than humans. Their first attachment is to someone who feeds them and takes care of them. "You see, it's you who should take care of him, because he likes you more," she once said when he reminded her of her promise to take care of the dog. "He likes me the most because I take care of him," Bryce snorted. And here you are, women. Vera knew what it would lead to. She fluttered her eyelashes at her husband, with whom she had lived for 10 years. Bryce's mouth was practically watering. Men are so simple, she thought to herself. Vera knew that she was the most difficult person in this relationship. She knew that they would not become less complicated in the near future, and she understood that her husband did not deserve the pain ahead. Vera and Bryce recently celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary. Bryce thought he had the perfect wife and the perfect marriage. Of course, the couple sometimes quarreled, but never over something important. So, he was a Cubs fan, and Vera loved the White Sox. This is probably the biggest topic of debate, he thought, but I thought wrong. Vera is an assistant to the vice president at an international insurance company. She worked at World X-Ray for 9 years, with Anand Patel as her immediate supervisor for the last 6. They worked well together professionally and became good friends. Vera and Bryce even spent time with Anand and his wife outside the office. Bryce liked this man. For 3 years, Vera and Anand were nothing more than colleagues and friends. She found her boss pleasant, charming and handsome. He is 45 in good physical shape, with salt and pepper black hair with gray and big brown eyes. His Indian background gave him a light brown complexion, and his education in the UK was a typical British accent of the highest grade. His baritone voice gave him an almost lawyer-like type of mellifluous speech. Vera never thought about cheating on Bryce. She considered her husband to be no less handsome than her boss. He had light brown hair and large expressive blue eyes. He spent several evenings at the gym and looked the part. He perfectly matched the profile of a chartered accountant, being quiet and thoughtful. He did not behave very well in society, but Vera knew that his love for her knew no bounds. Vera and Anand sometimes went to lunch and talked about business. Over time, this turned into conversations about personal life. It wasn't until a few years later that the couple began to meet for lunch solely for personal reasons, and this quickly became the norm. Anand knew that found him desirable, but he was not a serial skirt chaser. Before that, he had cheated on only twice in his marriage. Neither he nor Vera had any plans to further develop this friendship so far. This has not happened. About 6 months after the start of the private dinners, the couple ended up in bed at the hotel during a long lunch break. Vera was surprised that after her first relationship with Anand, she did not feel guilty. They made love twice that first time, and both enjoyed it immensely. They hadn't done anything she hadn't done with Bryce before, but the fact that this was the first time in a dozen years that she'd shared a bed with someone other than her husband made him very arousing. Anand smiled to himself at how wet the woman was. Her body was both curvy and toned. The couple waited a week before arranging a second date. In the opinion of both, it was no worse than the first one. Moreover, even better, since they studied each other's bodies and what each of them likes. Vera used her excellent management skills to keep everything in order, although she was always worried that her husband would find out about it. After a few weeks, she even began to amuse herself that she managed to hide her affair from him so easily. She felt taller and, to be honest, smarter than her ignorant husband. Vera was not deceived that she was not having an affair. However, she felt that he did not take away an iota of her husband's love. She felt a surge of energy both in her marriage and in her life. She has her husband's love as well, a relationship with a lover. Although she did not love Anand the way she loved Bryce, she knew that her feelings for him were much more than simple lust. Vera made sure to stay with Bryce and give him absolutely every ounce of love and lust that she thought he wanted or needed. It seemed to her that she and her husband were closer than ever, and she would certainly find out if he guessed what was happening. At the same time, she still felt some tension forcing her to keep her two lives separate. Since she worked next to her husband, Vera and her lover didn't have much time to do anything else besides making love when they were together. Both knew they had other interests and wanted to explore them further. But she knew that Anand wanted to devote more time to her, but she understood that this would not happen unless her husband left the city, and this rarely happened. She decided that it was a wonderful problem to have two attractive men who loved her. When Bryce found out about it a few months later, he was less optimistic. One evening, when he was alone, because Vera had to stay late at work, he took his wife's iPad from the table next to his lazy-boy chair, a lazy chair with a sliding leg part, instead of getting up and taking his laptop from the home office. When he logged into Amazon Prime to order some books, two addresses appeared in the Delivered to Address field. The first was the England's home address, but the second belonged to Anand Patel, Vera's boss, and it was not his usual home address. Bryce's eyes widened significantly as he looked at the second address. His immediate reaction was a feeling of nausea in his stomach, but this feeling quickly turned into rage. He screamed, and his scream reverberated off all four walls surrounding him. Then he went to his liquor cabinet, poured himself a double shot of single malt whiskey, and began to make plans. The biggest problem for Bryce was that a few minutes ago he would have told anyone and everyone that he loved his wife to distraction, and this feeling did not evaporate, despite her betrayal. If further investigation reveals that she was actually cheating, he will have to figure out his reaction and see if they can continue to live as a married couple. About an hour later, Vera returned home, singing as she walked through the door. For the first time, as far as Bryce remembers, he didn't jump up from his seat and rush to her for a welcoming kiss. This did not escape Vera either. "Hi, honey, is everything okay?" "What is it?" she asked, walking over to Bryce, who was sitting in his lazy boy and reading the sports section of the newspaper. "Not even close," Bryce muttered, turning his head so that Vera's kiss intended for his lips landed on his cheek. Vera stepped back and looked at her husband carefully. For the first time, she wondered if he had somehow found out about her affair. Bryce caught the look out of the corner of his eye and realized that he needed to act calmer until he could formulate a plan. It was not in his nature to act without preparation. Suddenly feeling insecure, Vera decided that caution was the best part of valor and did not continue the conversation. She made a mental note to pay more attention to her husband's mood. Perhaps she takes him for granted. The next day at work, Bryce called his good friend, a former lawyer. After Bryce explained his problem, a friend called his investigator and brought him into the case. 2 weeks later, Bryce had confirmation of his wife's infidelity, including photos and videos. "And now what, amigo?" his friend asked him. For the first time since his parents died in a car accident 5 years ago, Bryce openly cried. Vera tried to be inconspicuous, but over the next few days, after he did not greet her that evening, she carefully watched her husband. She knew there was no guile in Bryce, and she felt she would quickly find out if he suspected she was having an affair. Vera even mentally called it a novel. She knew it was wrong, but at the same time she couldn't convince herself that it was wrong, especially since she wasn't neglecting Bryce in the least. After several days of watching her husband, the only difference Vera could notice was in the bedroom. Bryce usually initiated lovemaking as often as she did, but for the next week he made no attempt at intimacy. When she did it herself a couple of days later, he looked reluctant. But then he showed such physical strength as he had never shown before, hammering her into the mattress that evening, and every time since then, when she initiated, he pounded into her heart. Bryce's newfound physical strength in the bedroom was his only way to vent his growing hatred of his wife's infidelities. He stopped trying to get Vera to make love, but when she started, he did everything to get his own, very powerful. He was surprised that she hadn't caught his anger. Moreover, she seemed to enjoy this new Bryce. "Come on, big boy," Vera moaned when Bryce used her one night. The last thing Vera had at that moment was worry about anything. At that moment, Bryce turned his wife over and lifted her legs. Her last half-conscious thought was that she was the luckiest woman in the world, having 2 stallions. Bryce instructed his lawyer to draw up divorce papers for adultery, although in the state of no fault, it did not make any financial difference. A divorce from his wife would be pretty fair, since they earn the same money and they don't have children yet. They'll have to sell the house and split all the profits. "I know it sounds crazy, but just hold on to the papers until I tell you," Bryce explained. "I want to let this go on for a while longer, and maybe she'll come to her senses. I love this stupid fool, and maybe with the help of counseling, are you even going to demand an explanation?" John Jefferson asked. "That would probably get it over with faster." "Probably not. You know how stubborn Faith can be. If I have to step in, she'll just push harder. Everything has to come from her, and then maybe we'll have a chance." "You're the boss. Tell me when." "The papers will be stored for as long as Twinkies. American cupcake with cream filling." A year later, Bryce was completely amazed that his supposedly smart wife did not notice the rift that had arisen between them. The little touches and glances between them disappeared. Intimacy was reduced to once a week, and when they were intimate, it was all about making love. Although Vera might not know it, Bryce noted that they had not made love since he found out about the betrayal. He was also amazed that Vera was able to continue pretending to be a faithful wife. It seems that she was able to successfully develop her career, maintain a strong romance, and keep up with all her hobbies and social events. When he thought about it, he had to admit that it was all very impressive. Since Bryce didn't seem to want to pull the trigger on the divorce, things could have gone on for a long time. But fate intervened in the form of Anand's promotion. He was promoted to the position of director in the London office of the company, and he was supposed to leave in a month. Vera was devastated by this development, although professionally she was happy for her lover. "Maybe this is the God's way of telling us it's time to end our relationship," Anand said. "We have been doing this for 3 years and have never been caught. I would say that we hid everything very well, and maybe we were a little lucky." Over the next 2 weeks, both Vera and Anand shed tears several times. Bryce noted to himself that Vera seemed distracted at times. He wondered if the problem was with her job or her relationship with Anand. "Is something going on, baby?" he asked. Vera looked as if she wanted to say something, but restrained herself and left the room. Bryce guessed inwardly that there were problems in paradise between lovers and smiled. Lisa Patel was delighted with both the promotion her husband received and the place where he was sent. She grew up in London and had a family there. She took responsibility for packing her family's belongings so that they, her 2 children and herself would return to London a week before Anand was due to leave. This gave the lovers a week before Anand was due to fly to London from New York. Vera thought this plan was reasonable, but Anand was not convinced. She was supposed to fly to New York on Friday and spend the whole weekend with Anand before he flew to London on Monday morning. The lovers could eat in good restaurants, go to a Broadway play, and see some of the sights before saying goodbye for the last time. The only drawback of this plan was that Vera was going to tell her husband that she would spend the last weekend with Anand. And why tell him, Vera? Anand asked. Just tell me it's a business trip. He'll never know. How many business trips have I had over the years of working here? Not a single one. And suddenly I have to go for the weekend? Bryce may be gullible, but it seems far-fetched. If I lie and get caught, Bryce and I are finished. But if I tell him the truth and appeal to his love for me, I really think we can get through this. It might hurt him a little, but he loves me wholeheartedly and he's the most logical guy I know. It would be more logical to tell him, she explained. Well, if you think it's right, you know him better than anyone, Anand said. Vera waited until the evening before leaving for New York to tell her husband everything. After eating and clearing the table, Vera snuggled up to Bryce on the couch. As had been the custom for the past 2+ years, Bryce didn't snuggle up to her, but he didn't move away either. He seemed to be engrossed in watching the series. Vera waited a few minutes, then coughed. I have to leave this weekend, Bryce, she began, sitting silently until her husband slowly admitted that he had heard her words. He stared at her in silence. She outlined a plan for the weekend, starting with Anand's promotion, but never confessed to the ongoing affair. So, he's leaving for good, and after this weekend we won't see him again. We have feelings for each other, and we just have to finally connect. We have been experiencing these feelings for several years now, and it seems to us that this is a great way to put an end to everything, Vera said. After that, he'll be in London, and I'll be here, and I'll spend the rest of our lives making amends to you. We will not correspond. We won't talk on the phone. Nothing. This will be completely over. Bryce did not expect such a statement. He could barely keep his mouth shut, especially when she blatantly lied that they had never had anything amorous. I've been a good wife to you. You never knew anything about our relationship, and I've never hidden anything from you, Vera said. Bryce tried to object, but nothing came out of his mouth. He lowered his head, and forced himself to count to 10. He was thinking about how much he should tell. You can't do that, Vera, Bryce said. I don't care what you're guided by. We swore an oath, and you have no right to change the rules for making love on the weekend with another man. Does Lisa know about this? If so, I can't imagine her being happier about it than I am. Does she even know? Vera blushed deeply. I don't know if Anand told Lisa. She has already left for London. Listen, Bryce. I'm not asking you for permission to do this. I'll do it anyway, regardless of your answer. We can talk about this in more detail when I get back, she said. I think that's why you waited until the last minute to tell me. You don't need permission, just forgiveness. Baby, you know you always give in to me when we argue. Sooner or later, you'll realize that it won't hurt us, and you'll let me do it, or you'll forgive me later, she said. Not this time. This is the straw that breaks the camel's back, Bryce said. You get on a plane, and it's over between us. Bryce's last sentence sounded like hitting Vera in the face with a spiked glove. If she heard Bryce say that this was the last straw, she didn't pay any attention. Bryce thought about going to sleep in the guest room, but then decided that he would not let his wife kick him out of her bed. He was already asleep when Vera went upstairs and climbed into bed. Bryce got up about an hour earlier than usual. Before leaving, he found Vera's small suitcase ready to be shipped on the bed in the guest room, but when he returned home a little after 5 in the evening, it was not there. He called his lawyer and said only one word. Let's go. The taxi to the airport stopped in front of the hotel almost immediately after 1500 hours. Anand took Vera's suitcase to the car and put it in the back seat, after which the couple kissed goodbye with tears in their eyes. Only now the kiss was interrupted by a rude man who patted Vera on the shoulder. The couple tried to ignore the annoying harasser, but the man did not like it. Vera, England? Are you Vera England? He asked. The couple broke off their embrace and both sighed in disgust. Yes, Vera barked. Mrs. England, you've been served, the man said, putting a manila envelope in her hand. The hugs were quickly forgotten. Tears welled up from Vera's eyes. She handed the envelope to Anand, who tore it up angrily. I thought you said he was a reasonable person, thoughtful or something like that. You said it wouldn't be a problem. He had to act awfully fast to serve you so quickly. Vera was crying too much to think rationally. It was going to be a long flight home. She wasn't surprised that Bryce hadn't met her at the airport. I took an Uber home. Bryce was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. There was a second cup in Vera's place. She took the hint and sat down, tears already starting to drip. Please, Vera, stop this damn waterfall. I should be the one crying. They cheated on me, Bryce said. Vera looked up at Bryce's words. The tears stopped immediately, but her blood pressure was through the roof. It wasn't cheating. I told you what I was going to do, she said. Did I agree with your plan? No. That's why you changed. You have no right to make rules, in this case, change them, Bryce said. It was just one weekend of our entire married life, she said. 2.5 days out of thousands at the moment, and many thousands more ahead. Do you really want to get divorced because of this? Actually, no. I think I could put up with it, if that were the case, Bryce said, looking straight into his wife's eyes. For the first time, Bryce saw that his wife had broken down. She just started counting in her head. How ignorant do you think I am? This is not the first time for both of you. Yes, it was your first weekend, but you've both been making love for over 2 years, as far as I can tell. I have to give you credit. You've been living a double life for at least 2 years. The perfect wife and cheater. I held on, hoping that you would come to your senses and give up on him. But with your weekend out of time, you crossed the line. Vera felt dizzy, even though she was sitting. She took a sip of coffee, trying to collect her thoughts. Why didn't you say anything before? Why didn't you try to stop me? What is it? She asked, almost in a whisper. When I found out, it had been going on for quite a long time. I was hoping you'd stop because it's not right, and because you love me. That's stupid, he said, but I love you. She said, I didn't love you any less, but I love him too. I am capable of loving you both, but you are my husband. You've always been number one. And no, there is no number one, because there shouldn't be a number 2, or 3, or 4, he said. It's just you and Anand. Well, now it's just you. He left, and it was just you and me, Vera said. Well, now it's just you. I'm not in this equation anymore, baby. Oh, come on, Bryce. He's gone. There is no reason for a divorce, Vera said. If he hadn't left, would you have stopped using him? Bryce said. Vera lowered her eyes. She didn't need to answer. Why did you think you could make love to him? How did it start? He asked, you know Anand, and you like him. She began before Bryce interrupted her. I liked it, he said. Okay, I get it. But he's a great guy, and after you. I think he's the most handsome man I know. And it just happened. And it happened, and it happened, and it happened. Bryce snorted when his wife looked at him with displeasure. We have real feelings for each other. You know I'll never be able to make love. I love you both, Vera said. Harf. It doesn't happen that way, baby. You can't love two people, Bryce said. Have I ever taken anything away from you? Have I ever refused you in bed? What is it? She asked. Yes, you gave him what you swore would be exclusively mine. We both took an oath. It's so much more than a bed, baby. Trust. Respect. Now that Anand is gone, I will expect you to replace him with someone else, because you clearly don't respect me enough to not let that happen. Something, Bryce said. I don't see the possibility of finding a third man in my life to love. Most of them were lucky to find only one big love, but I found two of them. I've already exceeded my lifetime catch limit, Vera said. You still don't get it, do you? The only thing I don't hear from you is an apology, he said. I'm sorry I hurt you. I never wanted this, but I just couldn't tell you because I knew it was wrong. He interrupted. You don't regret the affair, do you? Bryce continued. Honestly, no, Vera said. I love Anand. I liked our experience together. As I said before, I have two men whom I love and who love me in return. I wouldn't trade it for anything. Bryce shook his head in disbelief. He expected remorse and guilt. To his shock, he received neither. What about Lisa? He asked. She didn't know about the affair, did she? Didn't you know? Oh no, Vera said. Don't. Please don't tell me you told her everything. She didn't know? Oh my God. She's going to hate me. Yeah, that's about it, Bryce said. Why did you tell her? Vera asked. She shouldn't have found out. She should know. We were her friends, as well as his. They don't keep secrets from friends. And why shouldn't she know if it's such pure love, practically a love story for the ages? Vera clenched her fists in despair, staring at her husband. You say it sounds cheap and tasteless. It wasn't like that, she croaked. Lisa probably won't agree with you, and neither will I, he said. They have 2 children, Bryce. You're going to blow up their family, she said. Only if Lisa agrees with the way I look at it. If she agrees with your point of view, I think you're both safe. But if she agrees with my point of view, it still won't mean that it was me who blew up their family. I didn't sleep with her husband, Bryce said. The next day, there was a phone call from Anand to Vera while she was at work. Lisa obviously hadn't had time to file for divorce yet, but when Anand showed up at his new home in London, his wife wouldn't even let him on the doorstep. I can't believe your husband did this to me, he shouted into the phone. I thought we were friends. Yes, but I think he felt that his friend shouldn't sleep with his wife for the last 3 years, Vera said. I tried to explain it to him, but he doesn't believe me. He behaves very harshly towards everything. There has never been such a thing before that he did not concede to me in anything. I think there's a little more to it than the color of the walls in the living room, Anand said dejectedly. It took a week before Bryce got a call from Vera's parents. He and his relatives have always had a good relationship, which became even stronger when his own parents died in a car accident. Have you thought about consulting, son? His father-in-law asked him. You've both lived for 10 years. Weren't you planning to have children soon? Yes, but now I think it will never happen, Bryce said. Oh, no, son. Don't let something small turn into something fatal, his father-in-law said. Something small? Bryce asked. He quickly realized that Vera had not confided in her parents and realized that the rest of the conversation would not be easy. She said you two didn't agree on something, but she didn't say it was something vital, his father-in-law said. What we disagree on is her long-term affair with her former boss. Did you know that they've been fucking sleeping together for over 2 years? On the other end of the phone, Ralph Carville gasped. It's a shock when someone tells a father that his little daughter is a cheater. Bryce then heard him ask his wife if she knew about their daughter's infidelity and heard her stutter but did not hear an answer. Damn it, Faith. He is a member of the family. How could you do this to him? He heard Ralph shouting at his wife. How long have you known this? Damn, woman. The incredibly stubborn Ralph got in touch again. I'm sorry, Bryce. I didn't know, but obviously my daughter and my wife had secrets from both of us. I know I didn't raise her to become a cheater. An affair for several years? And she thought you'd agree to that? Damn it. I raised an arrogant cheater. Once again, I'm sorry, Bryce. We're all sorry, Dad. Good night. Bryce couldn't believe it, but Vera fought against the divorce. It was all over when Vera's lawyer offered marriage counseling and the judge giggled. "You're serious, Mr. Liston?" "It is absolutely clear to me that Mrs. England had a long-term relationship with her then boss, and I must assume that Mr. England did not want this. Honestly, only an idiot would agree to a consultation after what he's been through." The divorce was finalized 6 months later. The only point of disagreement in the divorce was the dog Hank. Bryce assumed that the dog would leave with him, but Vera insisted that the dog stay with her because Bryce gave the dog to her. Bryce finally gave in, but as he was driving away from the house, Hank jumped into the front seat next to the driver in Bryce's car. Vera repeatedly called out before forcibly pulling out the big dog, only to see it jump back in. "Keep the fucking dog, you bastard!" Vera shouted. Bryce noted to himself that this was the first obscenity he had ever heard from his ex-wife.